It's been a while since Rob Reiner tragically passed. A devastating event at the Brentwood home of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle, continues to weigh heavily on those following the story. What first sent shockwaves through Hollywood has slowly evolved into something far more unsettling as new information keeps emerging step by step, leaving many deeply shaken.
There was new video released yesterday showing Nick Reiner calmly strolling near his parents' home hours before the murders. This was obtained by the New York Post. Let's take a look at it. It's video one.
As more details surface, a preliminary forensic review has helped investigators narrow down a key window of time, and what it suggests has raised serious concern. Authorities now say the situation escalated rapidly, and what unfolded inside that home was not sudden or random, but the result of mounting tension that had been building quietly beneath the surface. Sources familiar with the timeline believe the night may have started earlier at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party, where several guests noticed Nick acting differently than usual, appearing tense, distracted, and unpredictable. What reportedly began as an argument didn't simply end when the party did, and that lingering tension appeared to follow him long after he left, setting the stage for what came next. After leaving the event, Nick is said to have returned to the Brentwood area, calm on the outside, controlled in his movements, and deliberate with every step. Investigators say he later checked into a nearby hotel, remaining quiet and composed, drawing no attention as he paid and went to his room. What surprised many was what followed shortly after. Records indicate that Nick secured legal representation from Alan Jackson, one of the most prominent defense attorneys in the country, using family inheritance funds, a move that stood out due to how quickly it happened. According to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, the incident inside the home is believed to have occurred sometime between midnight and the early morning hours. There were no signs of forced entry, as access to the home was already available, along with full familiarity with the residents. Security records later placed Nick at a Santa Monica hotel around 4 a.m., roughly 20 minutes from Brentwood. Staff reported nothing unusual, no visible distress, no urgent calls, just a man sitting quietly, appearing detached from events unfolding elsewhere. Hours later, concern turned into alarm when a scheduled visitor arrived at the home and received no response. Calls were made, doors were opened, and in that moment, everything changed forever. As authorities rushed in and secured the scene, one thing became clear. This was not just a shocking discovery, but the result of a night that unraveled in silence, with surveillance footage near Exposition Park capturing Nick around 9 p.m., adding another.
It's just a sidewalk. This is just him walking. For the listening audience, he has a bag over his left shoulder. He's walking calmly.
Piece to a troubling timeline. He was later seen stopping to buy a sports drink, pacing slightly, scanning the area, clearly restless but still composed enough to complete the purchase just minutes later. The behavior stood out, not chaotic, not frantic, but heavy with tension, like something was weighing on him internally. At approximately 9:15 p.m., LAPD officers, working alongside federal marshals, approached and detained him nearby. There was no struggle, no resistance, and no explanation offered at the time. Officers noted how quietly everything unfolded, with no dramatic reaction as he was taken into custody. Footage from that moment shows a young man who appeared completely drained. His expression wasn't panic or fear, but exhaustion, the kind that looks emotional and deep, like someone running on empty. He remained silent as officers placed him in custody, saying nothing as events moved forward. Later, forensic estimates suggested that Rob and Michelle had likely passed several hours before they were discovered, a timeline that only intensified the unanswered questions. Investigators were forced to confront a difficult issue.
Doesn't look irate, doesn't look out of his mind, looks kinda normal. He's walking past a gas station with a hat. He has not yet murdered anybody, allegedly.
What events led up to that moment, and how everything escalated so quietly? Authorities believe Nick may have attempted to clean himself up, either before leaving the home or later while staying at the hotel. Despite that, experts say traces of evidence can still remain on clothing, skin, or even show up through surveillance footage, adding another layer to the investigation. Cameras tracked his movements through Santa Monica that same morning, mapping a path that raised further attention. Experts believe the object involved was likely taken from inside the home, nothing elaborate or planned in advance, just something ordinary and easily accessible, which made the situation even more unsettling.
Because Nick was familiar with the home, investigators say he was able to move through it with precision. Every hallway, every room, every corner was known to him, turning a once comfortable space into something completely unrecognizable. As the investigation continued, early assumptions quickly fell apart. Initial reports suggesting a single incident were revised after forensic analysis revealed multiple serious injuries, shifting the entire understanding of what took place. The reality, according to experts, was far more complex. Professor Joseph Scott Morgan, a respected forensic specialist, explained that repeated injuries typically suggest sustained actions rather than a sudden emotional reaction. When different injury patterns appear together, experts say it often points to a prolonged event, not a brief lapse in judgment. This was not something that happened in seconds, and experts made that very clear. From a forensic standpoint, specialists emphasized
A drink at a gas station moments before he was arrested. This is an ABC News video. Here he is. Once again, he's got a bag over his left shoulder, it appears, and he's kind of meandering around a convenience store, and again, does not look out of his mind, deranged, in any way disturbed.
that situations like this unfold over time, not in a flash. They stress that real-life scenes are nothing like what movies show, requiring physical effort, coordination, and prolonged contact, which made the findings even more unsettling. Investigators described the incident as structured rather than chaotic, with details suggesting intention instead of a sudden emotional surge. Every element reviewed by specialists pointed toward controlled actions, not random movement, a distinction that significantly shaped how the case was examined. Another disturbing detail emerged from early reports, suggesting the couple may have been resting when the incident began. If accurate, experts say this would indicate that the individual involved was familiar with daily routines, habits, and moments of vulnerability, a factor that adds a deeply uncomfortable layer to the timeline. Experts explain that actions carried out at close range reflect a complete invasion of personal space. This is not distant or detached behavior, but something personal, controlled, and deliberate, which forensic analysts say carries serious weight during reviews. As evidence continued to surface, one conclusion kept coming back into focus. The person involved had direct access to the home and could enter without drawing attention, a fact that immediately narrowed the scope of the investigation and redirected attention toward what happened next. Reports later revealed that Nick—
This is after, again, the murder. One more video I want to show you. This is of him surrendering on an LA
used family inheritance funds to secure legal representation, a development that stunned many watching the case unfold. Questions spread rapidly, with public attention turning toward how such a defense could be funded and where the money originated. Nick did not have a large independent financial foundation, with past work reportedly limited to smaller projects connected to his father. That detail made the funding source impossible to ignore and added fuel to an already intense public discussion. The attorney representing him, Alan Jackson, is among the most well-known defense lawyers in the country. Known for handling only the most demanding cases, his reputation alone comes with an enormous cost, with past cases reportedly reaching into the tens of millions, even at reduced rates. That figure quickly became a symbol of privilege colliding with tragedy. For many observers, the optics were jarring as media pressure intensified, and reporters pressed Jackson outside the courthouse, searching for answers as the case continued to unfold. His response was short and carefully guarded. He declined to comment on who was covering the legal fees, offering no clarification at all, and that silence immediately sparked widespread speculation. Some observers suggested the case might be about visibility, while others quietly wondered about private arrangements happening behind closed doors. Then came a major development on December 25, 2025, one that shifted the entire conversation overnight.
Street as the cops corner him. This is a little harder to see, but you can see a bit. Hold on. Where do we get this? Oh, this is from the New York Post. Okay. The law enforcement has since said he went into custody willingly. He didn't resist arrest.
Multiple insiders close to the family revealed that the legal costs were reportedly being covered through the Reiner estate, which is estimated at roughly $200 million, a revelation that stunned many following the case. According to sources, the decision was said to involve surviving relatives who believed that pursuing a mental health-focused legal strategy was the most compassionate path forward under the circumstances. They reportedly felt this approach aligned with what Rob and Michelle might have wanted for their son, within the boundaries of California law. Under state law, anyone convicted in such a case cannot personally benefit from a victim's estate, a legal reality that now hangs over every part of this situation. However, legal experts note that the law does not prevent other relatives or estate executors from using funds to cover legal defense costs before a verdict is reached.
Legal analyst Sean Westbar explained that while this practice is technically allowed during active proceedings, it remains highly controversial and legally risky. Some experts argue that an executor could choose to refuse such payments entirely in order to avoid public backlash or future legal disputes.
Hold on a sec. You can see the cops. You can't really see the defendant at this point. He's behind the car, but you can see the cops are not in like a terror stance that we sometimes see when somebody resists or pulls a gun or a knife on them. They actually look pretty calm. They far outnumber the one guy, but he was brought into custody.
As of now, neither the family nor the court has officially confirmed where the defense funding is coming from. That lack of clarity has left the public with more questions than answers, as issues of loyalty, justice, and morality collide in real time. And then came the next pivotal moment. Nick Reiner appeared in court for the first time, facing 2 first-degree charges with aggravating circumstances involving multiple individuals, a moment that underscored the seriousness of the case. The gravity of the situation became undeniable the moment he entered the courtroom. Nick was brought in wearing a standard blue inmate uniform, a stark and sobering symbol of how dramatically everything had changed. Standing beside him was Alan Jackson, exactly as many expected. Calm, controlled, and fully composed, he appeared steady as the hearing began, projecting confidence without saying much at all. The courtroom atmosphere felt tense, especially with strict restrictions in place and no live cameras allowed, a decision that only intensified public curiosity. Jackson quickly requested a delay of the formal arraignment so Nick could have time to determine how to move forward. The judge agreed, setting the next hearing for January 7th, and until then, Nick remains in custody at the Los Angeles County Jail, keeping the case firmly under a national spotlight. The only time the public heard Nick's voice came during a brief exchange with the judge. He was asked whether he would waive his right to a speedy trial so the arraignment could be postponed, a moment that drew complete silence across the room. His response was quiet, flat, and almost mechanical. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." That was all. No explanation, no visible emotion, just a short statement that echoed heavily through the courtroom. With that, the hearing ended quickly, leaving behind an uneasy silence in the growing sense that this was only the beginning. All eyes immediately shifted to January 7th, a date that could influence everything that follows for the family, the court, and the public watching closely. But before moving ahead, investigators revisited a deeply troubling background detail that had followed Nick for years. Behind the well-known last name and public privilege was a long and painful personal struggle that many say quietly shaped his adult life. Nick was born in 1993, and reports suggest he began facing substance-related challenges during his teenage years. What followed was a pattern that escalated quickly and became difficult to break, especially while growing up under intense expectations, public scrutiny, and constant pressure. Those close to the family say Rob and Michelle recognized the warning signs early and took action to help. They reportedly arranged treatment programs while he was still young, marking the beginning of a long cycle of recovery efforts and setbacks that repeated over the years. Despite everything, they never turned away. The family continued offering support, structure, and opportunities to rebuild, even allowing him to return to their Brentwood home in hopes of restoring stability and routine. That long history now sits at the center of the case, raising difficult questions about responsibility,
boundaries, and how far love can stretch under unimaginable strain. Rob reportedly spent countless hours trying to guide Nick through creative work, believing structure and purpose could help steady him. He truly thought that giving his son something meaningful to build might give him a reason to keep moving forward, something solid to hold on to in a shaky world. But addiction doesn't play fair, and Nick's recovery always remained fragile. The progress was real, but never secure, and the very home meant to protect and stabilize him would later become the center of everything that unraveled. What was supposed to be a place of safety slowly turned into a pressure-filled space, packed with fear, exhaustion, and constant worry. Friends say the stress built quietly over time, with no clear answers and no easy way out. Rob once shared that being a parent means never giving up on your child, no matter how far they fall. Those close to him say he lived by that belief every single day, standing firm even when things felt impossible. But in the Reiner family's case, that devotion ended in unimaginable loss. The son they had protected for years ultimately became the central figure in a tragedy no one could have foreseen. When Rob and Michelle eventually tried what friends described as tough love, Nick chose to leave and live life on his own terms. He drifted from place to place, Maine, New Jersey, Texas, chasing freedom but finding instability instead. Those years were later described as his darkest stretch. Nick lived rough, disconnected, constantly at risk, surviving more on chance than direction, leaning on substances and unsafe connections just to make it through each day. His family watched from a distance, powerless to pull him back, hoping each phone call wouldn't be the last. Then came a brief moment of hope in 2015.
At just 22 years old, Nick managed to stay clean long enough to work alongside his father on the film Being Charlie. The project mirrored his personal struggles and brought father and son back together, side by side, if only for a moment that felt like a second chance. For a brief period, it appeared that things were finally turning around. Trust slowly rebuilt, routines returned, and there was a sense that redemption might actually be within reach, giving the family cautious hope. But by 2018, that fragile progress reportedly collapsed again. Nick experienced another serious setback, and sources say the situation spiraled quickly, reaching a level that deeply alarmed those closest to him. During a period described as emotionally volatile and confusing, reports indicate that significant damage was caused to the family's property, pushing everyone involved to an emotional breaking point. The tension became impossible to ignore. Faced with limited options, Rob and Michelle made the painful decision to send Nick back into treatment, hoping it could help stabilize him and offer a reset. It was not an easy choice, but one made out of concern and responsibility. By 2020, they allowed him to return to the Brentwood home once again, determined to keep him close, supported, supervised, and safe. Friends say this decision came from love, but also from growing fear about what could happen if he was left on his own. Still, those close to the family say hope was fading fast. Nick's behavior reportedly became more unpredictable in the months leading up to the incident, raising serious concern about his mental and emotional state. That long and painful history now sits at the center of the legal case. Many are asking whether long-term substance struggles could become part of the defense strategy moving forward. Alan Jackson, Nick's high-profile attorney, is known for building arguments that closely examine mental condition and intent. Some insiders believe the defense may argue that years of substance-related challenges affected Nick's ability to regulate his actions during that time. Witnesses at the Santa Monica Hotel later described him as appearing heavily impaired, a detail investigators have acknowledged. However, legal experts stress that this alone does not remove responsibility under the law. In most cases, voluntary substance use does not excuse actions. At most, it may influence how intent is interpreted, a critical factor in the most serious charges, while prosecutors continue to point to earlier conflicts in deliberate behavior as signs of awareness and control. Legal experts say that when actions suggest preparation rather than confusion, certain arguments become far more difficult to support. This case is expected to test where the line between long-term personal struggles and legal accountability truly sits, especially when history, intent, and mental condition are all deeply intertwined. Even if substance-related issues are raised as a mitigating factor, specialists note that such arguments carry limited weight in California law when first-degree charges are involved. If aggravating circumstances are applied, the potential consequences become extremely serious. With special circumstances, Nick could face life in prison without the possibility of release. Even without those enhancements, sentencing could still range from 25 years to life, underscoring the gravity of what's at stake. So far, authorities have stated there is no indication pointing to self-defense or accidental harm. Analysts reviewing the case describe the incident as driven by overwhelming emotion or loss of control rather than confusion or a momentary mistake. What intensifies public attention even further is the identity of those involved. Well-known figures with decades-long careers in Hollywood now sit at the center of this legal storm, raising the profile of the case dramatically. Reports suggest the potential witness list could include prominent names such as Conan O'Brien, Larry David, and Billy Crystal. Testimony from individuals of that stature could turn the proceedings into a massive media event, unlike most cases seen before. Legal analysts are already predicting that this could become one of the most closely followed trials in modern American history. Few cases ever reach this level of public scrutiny, especially when high-profile individuals and complex legal questions collide. Insiders believe the trial itself may not begin until late 2026 or even late 2027, with a plea agreement considered unlikely at this stage. Prosecutors are expected to focus heavily on physical evidence and a structured timeline, aiming to show escalation in awareness rather than disorder or chaos.
Every part of Nick's past is expected to be examined closely, with no detail left untouched. His long personal struggles, mental condition, and movements throughout that night will be reviewed step by step as the case moves forward. New forensic findings reportedly place Nick at the scene, supported by biological traces and surveillance footage, details that significantly complicate arguments like self-defense. Analysts say those elements alone make alternative explanations far harder to sustain. Age is another factor drawing attention. Rob and Michelle were elderly, while Nick was 32 at the time, an imbalance that presents an additional challenge for the defense as the evidence is weighed. In rare situations, attorneys attempt to push for reduced charges by arguing the absence of intent. Here, however, investigators point to the sequence of events, the object involved, and the sustained nature of the incident as indicators of deliberate action. If confirmed, specific injury patterns could further reinforce the prosecution's position that the event was close, personal, and controlled. Experts say findings like that are especially difficult for any defense team to explain away once presented clearly. Alan Jackson now faces intense pressure to build a narrative that introduces reasonable doubt without directly clashing with the physical evidence. Scene reconstructions, security recordings, and forensic mapping are expected to play a decisive role once testimony begins. Then there is the jury, 12 individuals from different walks of life, many far removed from wealth or Hollywood privilege. Their perspective will be critical as they decide whether to view Nick as someone overtaken by years of personal struggles, or as someone who had countless opportunities and still crossed an irreversible line. That question hangs over everything as the trial approaches. And as the focus sharpens, the story circles back to the night many believe set everything in motion. Conan O'Brien's annual Christmas party has long been known as one of Hollywood's most relaxed gatherings, a night meant for laughter, familiar faces, and no cameras, where longtime friends like Rob Reiner and Michelle were regular attendees. But this year was different. They brought Nick with them, a decision that now carries heavy significance as investigators continue piecing together what followed later that night. Friends later shared that the couple had been deeply worried about Nick for some time. In the months leading up to that night, his behavior had reportedly grown more unpredictable, sudden disappearances, sharp mood shifts, and late-night calls that left his parents anxious and worn down.
They didn't want to leave him alone. Bringing him along felt like the safest move at the time, a way to keep him close and supported rather than isolated. There was hope that a warm, familiar setting might help steady him. Nick wasn't originally on the guest list, but Rob personally reached out to Conan, who is widely known for his generosity and understanding. Conan agreed without hesitation. At first, everything seemed normal. Rob greeted friends, Conan welcomed them warmly, and Michelle stood out in an elegant dark dress. But Nick didn't quite blend in with the rest of the room. While guests laughed and mingled, Nick stayed near the edges, hoodie pulled tight, eyes constantly scanning the room. Several attendees later said his energy felt off, not loud or disruptive, just heavy and uncomfortable. He reportedly began approaching people abruptly, asking blunt questions like, "What's your full name?" and "Are you famous?" His tone was flat and his stare intense, making the interactions feel awkward rather than casual. Most guests answered politely before stepping away. Some exchanged uneasy looks, while others quietly whispered that something didn't feel right. Actress Jane Fonda later said she felt a sudden chill when he stood too close, staring without blinking. One of the most uncomfortable moments reportedly came when Nick interrupted a private conversation involving Bill Hader. From there, the tension only grew thicker. Nick kept repeating the same flat, almost robotic questions, brushing past attempts to calm the situation. When Bill Hader gently asked him to give some space, Nick didn't argue or explain. He reportedly stood there in silence, eyes fixed, before suddenly turning and walking away quickly. The shift in the room was immediate. Conversations dropped, laughter faded, and eyes followed Nick as he headed toward the exit. What had been a relaxed, cheerful night suddenly felt tight and uneasy. As the evening continued, the gathering never fully regained its rhythm. Guests tried to brush it off, but quiet whispers moved from group to group. Something felt off, and many could sense it. Michelle did her best to smooth things over, smiling and chatting, but her eyes kept drifting toward the hallway. Rob, ever protective, kept a subtle watch, following Nick at a distance, careful not to draw attention.
As the timeline sharpened with unsettling clarity, Nick's erratic behavior earlier that evening, the argument, the abrupt departure, and his movements afterward began to align. Yet even as the evidence stacked up, deeper questions continued to linger. Questions about responsibility, about limits, and about how far love can stretch before it finally breaks. Psychologists consulted by multiple outlets described the situation as a perfect storm. Long-term instability, emotional volatility, and unresolved trauma colliding all at once. That assessment forced the entertainment industry into an uncomfortable moment of reflection. Several insiders later admitted they had noticed Nick's behavior over the years, at events, on sets, and in social circles, but dismissed it as just another Hollywood quirk at the time. Looking back, many now question whether those signs should have been taken more seriously. As the trial approached, it became impossible to look away. Statements poured in from producers who had worked closely with Rob, expressing disbelief and deep grief over the loss. And actors described the situation as unreal, something that didn't feel possible even after it happened. Friends of Michelle, remembered for her warmth and steady presence, said they were completely shattered. "She always believed he would get better," one longtime friend said quietly. A line that now carries heartbreaking weight. That's what makes this unbearable. Even Conan O'Brien, who rarely speaks publicly about private matters, released a brief statement expressing sorrow and disbelief, saying his heart was with the Reiner family and everyone affected. His words reflected what many were feeling, but struggling to say. Nearly a year later, the case still dominates headlines. Every court filing and every new development reignites debate around mental health, privilege, and accountability. It all feels cinematic, but it is painfully real. For those directly involved, and for friends and fans watching from afar, the memory of that glittering December night has been permanently altered. What was meant to be a joyful celebration instead marked the beginning of one of Hollywood's most haunting chapters. A stark reminder that fame and success offer no shield from inner turmoil. Long before the night ended, Rob reportedly sensed things slipping. He pulled Nick aside near a quieter hallway, his voice firm but emotional, trying to regain control of the moment. The exchange escalated quickly, sharp enough that nearby guests paused their conversations as the tension became impossible to ignore. Rob was urging his son to steady himself, to slow down and to regain control. "You need to get it together," he said firmly, words that now echo with painful significance. Michelle stayed close, caught between her husband and her son. She shifted between quiet pleas and worried looks, urging Rob to stay calm and asking Nick to slow down, to breathe and to listen. But those nearby later said Nick didn't seem to be hearing any of it. His replies reportedly turned sharper, his tone hardening as the exchange intensified. Guests nearby sensed a shift almost immediately as the warmth of the party seemed to drain away, replaced by an uneasy silence that slowly spread through the room. Within minutes, the tension became impossible to ignore. Rob and Michelle made the painful decision to leave, offering quick goodbyes and forced smiles, their faces pale with concern as they headed toward the door. Michelle paused for just a brief moment. She looked back at Nick, the child she had protected, supported, and forgiven time and time again. One guest later said her expression felt like a silent message, filled with love, sadness, and limits reached. Nick remained behind, standing alone near the back of the room. His expression appeared empty, and several guests later said the atmosphere around him felt heavy and charged, as if something was deeply off. Whispers moved quietly through the room. Some guests kept their distance, hoping the tension would fade and the night could recover, even slightly. No one could have known that within hours, everything would collapse. The Reiners drove home in silence, unaware that it would be their final ride together as a family.
The home they had filled with patience, love, and years of effort to help their son would soon become the center of a story that stunned Hollywood and left lasting shockwaves. This case endures not only because of what happened, but because of what was lost. A family that fought for years to stay together, facing struggles few ever see. The hardest questions still linger. In those final moments, did Rob and Michelle sense that love alone might not be enough anymore? We may never fully understand that night, but we can remember who they were before everything fell apart. Their devotion, their hope, and the human story at the heart of it all. One quote echoed with painful weight. Nick had once said, "I feel like I was born into a spotlight. I never asked for that." Words that now carried a haunting significance. Investigators continued building the case piece by piece. Surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and witness statements from the party were carefully reviewed and cross-checked. As the timeline sharpened with unsettling clarity, Nick's erratic behavior earlier that evening, the argument, the abrupt departure, and his movements afterward began to align. Yet, even as the evidence stacked up, deeper questions continued to linger. Questions about responsibility, about limits, and about how far love can stretch before it finally breaks. Psychologists consulted by multiple outlets described the situation as a perfect storm. Long-term instability, emotional volatility, and unresolved trauma colliding all at once. That assessment forced the entertainment industry into an uncomfortable moment of reflection. Several insiders later admitted they had noticed Nick's behavior over the years, at events, on sets, and in social circles, but dismissed it as just another Hollywood quirk at the time. Looking back, many now question whether those signs should have been taken more seriously. As the trial approached, it became impossible to look away. Statements poured in from producers who had worked closely with Rob, expressing disbelief and deep grief over the loss. Actors described the situation as unreal, something that didn't feel possible even after it happened. Friends of Michelle, remembered for her warmth and steady presence, said they were completely shattered. She always believed he would get better, one longtime friend said quietly, a line that now carries heartbreaking weight. That's what makes this unbearable. Even Conan O'Brien, who rarely speaks publicly about private matters, released a brief statement expressing sorrow and disbelief, saying his heart was with the Reiner family and everyone affected. His words reflected what many were feeling, but struggling to say. Nearly a year later, the case still dominates headlines. Every court filing and every new development reignites debate around mental health, privilege, and accountability. It all feels cinematic, but it is painfully real. For those directly involved, and for friends and fans watching from afar, the memory of that glittering December night has been permanently altered. What was meant to be a joyful celebration instead marked the beginning of one of Hollywood's most haunting chapters, a stark reminder that fame and success offer no shield from inner turmoil. Long before the night ended, Rob reportedly sensed things slipping. He pulled Nick aside near a quieter hallway, his voice firm but emotional, trying to regain control of the moment. The exchange escalated quickly, sharp enough that nearby guests paused their conversations as the tension became impossible to ignore. Rob was urging his son to steady himself, to slow down, and to regain control. "You need to get it together," he said firmly, words that now echo with painful significance. Michelle stayed close, caught between her husband and her son. She shifted between quiet pleas and worried looks, urging Rob to stay calm and asking Nick to slow down, to breathe, and to listen. But those nearby later said Nick didn't seem to be hearing any of it. His replies reportedly turned sharper, his tone hardening as the exchange intensified. Guests nearby sensed a shift almost immediately, as the warmth of the party seemed to drain away, replaced by an uneasy silence that slowly spread through the room. Within minutes, the tension became impossible to ignore. Rob and Michelle made the painful decision to leave, offering quick goodbyes and forced smiles, their faces pale with concern as they headed toward the door. Michelle paused for just a brief moment. She looked back at Nick, the child she had protected, supported, and forgiven time and time again. One guest later said her expression felt like a silent message, filled with love, sadness, and limits reached. Nick remained behind, standing alone near the back of the room. His expression appeared empty, and several guests later said the atmosphere around him felt heavy and charged, as if something was deeply off. Whispers moved quietly through the room. Some guests kept their distance, hoping the tension would fade and the night could recover, even slightly. No one could have known that within hours, everything would collapse. The Reiners drove home in silence, unaware that it would be their final ride together as a family. The home they had filled with patience, love, and years of effort to help their son would soon become the center of a story that stunned Hollywood and left lasting shockwaves. This case endures not only because of what happened, but because of what was lost. A family that fought for years to stay together, facing struggles few ever see. The hardest questions still linger. In those final moments, did Rob and Michelle sense that love alone might not be enough anymore? We may never fully understand that night, but we can remember who they were before everything fell apart, their devotion, their hope, and the human story at the heart of it all.